Hello, and welcome to today's Division I Committee on Infractions press call. All participants are currently in listen-only mode. After speakers provide their opening remarks, there will be an opportunity for media to ask questions. And now I will turn the call over to Matt Migret, NCAA Managing Director for the Office of the Committee on Infractions. Matt.
Thank you. Welcome to today's press call to discuss the NCAA Division I Committee on Infractions panel's decision regarding Memphis and its head men's basketball coach. As members of the media, you should have received a link to both the press release and public decision, which contain the details of the case. The information is also available on ncaa.org. The Committee on Infractions is a group comprised of representatives across the NCAA membership and public who are separate from NCAA staff. The members of the committee who decided this case are Norman Bay, attorney in private practice, Cassandra Kirk, Chief Magistrate Judge in Atlanta, President Gary Miller, Chief Hearing Officer of the panel and President of Akron, Joe Novak, former head football coach at Northern Illinois, and Dave Roberts, Special Advisor to the University of Southern California. President Miller will now discuss the findings and decision of the committee. Following his comments, we will take questions. President Miller.
Thank you, Matt. The Committee on Infractions decision details the findings and penalties in this case. Our comments today are designed to address your questions. The decision stands on its own merits. The committee is aware that Memphis had a case resolved through the Independent Accountability Resolution process. That process is handled separately from the Committee on Infractions and does not set precedent for cases in the peer review process. My remarks today center only on the violations in the case at hand. Before discussing the penalties and violations for this case, I do want to briefly acknowledge that this is the first press call for a case that has been separated and resolved through different tracks. The process was endorsed by the Division I Board of Directors last year to allow parties who agree to violations and penalties to resolve their cases more quickly while preserving the opportunity for other parties to argue aspects of their case before the Committee on Infractions. Previously, when individuals contested their own violations and penalties, the process for the school could be prolonged. The Committee on Infractions has now fully adjudicated 2 cases under this process, and we found it to be effective and efficient. The violations in this case occurred when 2 men's basketball coaches made in-home visits to the same prospect while the recruit was a junior in high school and before such visits are allowed. The first visit was made by an assistant coach, and the second was made 2 weeks later by the head coach. While the violations themselves are relatively limited in nature, the committee determined that they violated fundamental recruiting rules in men's basketball and provided a significant recruiting advantage because they distinguished Memphis from other programs who were also recruiting the same high-profile recruit. The school agreed in November to these violations and agreed to pay a fine, serve an additional year of probation, and impose recruiting-related penalties on the men's basketball program. The men's basketball head coach argued that he should not be responsible for the violations because he did not know that the visits were not allowed under NCAA rules. The panel disagrees. Ignorance of the rules, claimed or legitimate, is not a defense for violating fundamental NCAA rules. Head coaches are expected to monitor their staff and promote compliance, including regularly consulting with compliance to ensure recruiting activities are permissible. This responsibility cannot be delegated to other campus staff. The committee reviewed the full case record and determined that the violations were level 2 mitigated for the head coach. In addition to the penalties the school had previously agreed to, the committee prescribed a 3-game suspension for the head coach to be served during the first 3 regular season games of the 2023-24 season. And that concludes my remarks.
With that, Megan, can you please explain to reporters how they can ask a question?
Yes, if you would like to ask a question, please use the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen. When we call on you, we would ask that you please state your name and affiliation prior to asking your question. Okay, our first question is going to come from Jason Munns. Jason, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Good morning. Yes, Jason Munns with the Commercial Appeal. I'm curious, when Coach Hardaway contested, what was he contesting? Was he contesting the findings of the enforcement staff, or was he contesting specific penalties, or both?
Yeah, Coach Hardaway acknowledged that a violation occurred, and he contested the level of that violation. He contended it should be a level 3 violation.
Are there any other questions? Again, if you would like to ask a question, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen. Okay, our next question comes from Kevin Wizzardo, I think. Kevin, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
If he had not contested, what kind of penalty would he have faced, or is this the penalty he would have faced when the other penalties were announced in December?
So the negotiated resolution would have prescribed penalties for the university and the coaches involved, and I'm not sure what they would have been.
But would they have been more than what was announced at the time, the self-imposed recruiting restrictions?
No, I don't know that. I think that would have been the result of the negotiated resolution that he was part of. But since he wasn't part of that, we have no way of knowing that.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Again, one more time, if you would like to ask a question, please use the raise hand function at the bottom of the screen. Our next question comes from Mark Giannato. Please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you. What, if anything, you mentioned there was an assistant coach involved as well. Are there any sort of sanctions or punishment or suspension imposed on that individual?
So it's my understanding that that individual voluntarily left the university. So this negotiated resolution in this case doesn't involve him.
Any other questions?
Thank you for joining us today. This concludes our comments. A recording of the press conference will soon be available on nca.org.